All right, you've taken the time to design the perfect business card. And in this case, what we did was just a sample, super quick, very basic, but we can take a basic card and make it epic by doing some simple finishing touches. So let me show you an example of some of those. So I've pulled up a few different finishing touches that we can do. So here's an example of spot gloss. So in this case, you see the shiny black, that is a spot gloss. It's basically a clear coat that's laid down over the top. So there's actually no ink on this. It's just a clear coating that then shines depending on the angle of the light. So we can do a spot gloss, or spot UV they call it. We could also do a foil. So a foil is literally that. It's just like a metallic foil that shines, and you can do reds, golds, blues, greens, you can, anything you can imagine here. And here's some examples of some different foils. And again, you kind of see how they reflect in the light. And that's a way to add some visual interest to your piece. Here's probably a really good example up close of how that metallic foil looks. We can do die cut business cards. So a die cut is literally a die that's made to cut out or to stamp out a shape. So in this case, we got the shape of the coffee mug, or in this case, they've stamped out the shape of their logo, and then they've also done rounded corners, and that's also part of a die. So your die can be the outside shape of the card, or maybe it's the die on the inside where we've punched out a physical shape. So there's lots of ways we could use die cuts as well. We can do embossing or debossing. In this case, this milk is a deboss, where it's actually sunk down into the card, or an emboss like this where it's actually raised up from the card. It's actually punched in from behind it. So there's a lot of cool finishing touches we could do. And what I'll do right now is I'm about to show you, well, how would you explain this to the printer? So let's take a look at that real quick. So first we need to decide, what we're going to do with our card. And in this case, I feel like a simple spot UV might be really effective. So what you would do is first and foremost talk to your printer and ask them how they want the file, because you don't want to set it up in a way that they're not able to work with, or if they prefer a certain format. But typically, this is how you would work. You would create a new layer in here. I'll just make a new layer, and I'll call this spot UV. And that's really all it takes. And now anything I draw on this layer, the printer will use as that fifth color where they drop down that spot UV. So for example, let's say we wanted to bump the letter M here and maybe my name with a shiny spot gloss on top of it. So what I'll do, I'll click on this layer, I'll command click to select it. So by holding on command, you can click right there on the thumbnail and it'll select whatever pixels are in that layer. I'll click once on my name, and I'll hold down command over the top of the letter T here. And then I'm going to add in the shift key, which then changes to a little plus sign and adds a selection for both of these. I'll come back to my spot UV layer, and depending on the printer, they might not care, so you might just fill it with black. I'll hit Alt Delete. Or maybe they want to really spell it out, in this case like with a bright magenta or something. So I could fill it with pink, and then that way I know anything on this spot UV layer is a separate color that gets printed. So then if I wanted to take this one step further and actually send it to the printer, some of them will just take your PSD file and they can get in here and they can see exactly what your intention is as far as where is the spot UV going to go. And some of them though prefer that you actually set it out as a separate file. So the way you would do that is I'm going to turn off this bleed mask I've got going on, and I would turn off my spot UV as well, and I would export this card by itself. So let's just do that real quick. I'll hit Command S to save my progress. I'll go to image, to layer. We will flatten the image here to discard all those layers, and then I'll hit Command Shift S to save as, and we'll save a Photoshop PDF version. I'll go to my desktop and we'll put this in the finals folder of my file sent, and we'll hit save, and that all looks fine for now. We'll hit save again, and then what I would do now is hit Command Option Z to step back to unflatten my document, and now I would turn on just that spot UV layer, and I would turn off everything else. So this is all we're seeing here. And now I'd hit Command Shift S again, and we'll save as a PDF. And this time I'll rename this as front-spot UV. Doesn't really matter what we call it, but that way we know that there's two different files. I'll turn off my layers. We don't need layers. I'll hit save, and I'll save this PDF. Let's turn off the Photoshop editing capabilities for this one. We'll hit save PDF again. All right, so now we should have two files here in our finals folder. So we've got our front PDF, and then we have our spot UV. So they're going to print anything that's black will be printed in that spot UV. Or in this case, the exact same format could have been done, but instead of being a spot UV, you would just call it, metallic foil or whatever it's going to be. And again, that's where you need to talk to your printer so they understand, okay, we're doing this in a blue foil or in a red foil or whatever we're going to do. And this is the file they would need. So they would take this, they'd print it one time through, and then they'd run the card again, but with this file to drop over that special effect. So that is how you send special spot UVs and metallic foils, and actually it would be the exact same process as well for the emboss and deboss. So hopefully that makes sense and gives you a much better understanding of how to take a simple business card design and turn it into something that actually is truly creative and stands out from the rest.